Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the Friday noontime show as we get the summer weekend started early here. We're going to be kicking off with Ray Rickman, the former state representative, former deputy secretary of state, now heads up Stages of Freedom to give his big view.
What year is this? Justice Kennedy is leaving the court in 40 days, less than 40 days. And the person sitting in the White House, Donald Trump, has promised to appoint someone who will eliminate the right to an abortion in America, in the United States of America. We are to be like a really bad third world country. Now, I need to remind people, because sometimes we're not reflective. We just don't think this stuff out. And particularly when we've had certain rights for nearly 50 years, we're not aware of what might happen. About 3 weeks ago, a young woman at one of the prestigious colleges, I'll leave it at that, you decide which one it was, her boyfriend, a friend of mine, associate of mine, maybe I'm a mentor to him, he told me that she was pregnant. And of course, being the age I am, I went like this. How could something like that happen? And he said he saw the reflections of shock on my face and in my brain probably, and he said it was a mistake. And I said, oh. And then he said, almost casually, we're going to fix it at the hospital tomorrow afternoon. And I will see that it never happens again. So she had an abortion, and 2 days later she told me everything went well and life's back to normal. And she also said she would go see a shrink and make sure that not only was her body going to be okay, but hopefully her mind was. And I suggest that she take him with her, because they got pregnant together. Maybe they need to get out of the pregnancy together. Now, can you imagine that Mr. Trump has appointed an ultra right-wing person to be a justice on the Supreme Court, and the Republicans have gotten together and let this go through, and the person is there for 30 years, maybe more. They're going to appoint a 40-year-old. And when this young woman shows up to have her abortion, she's going to be told it's illegal. You must bring this child into the world. Not the fetus, but turn it into a baby and bring the baby into the world, you 19-year-old. That's what she is. With your 20-year-old male friend who doesn't plan to marry you. Or maybe he will marry you. And both of your lives will be turned upside down, as will your families. So I tell this to people who are not pro-choice. Are you going to help with the child? Are you going to help as her life totally changes, and hopefully his too? Are you going to get involved, or are you going to just be sanctimonious, pompous, making someone else's life different? This is what Mr. Trump wants to do with his next Supreme Court justice appointment. And he'll try it on voting rights, he'll try it on civil rights, he'll try it on affirmative action, he'll try it on gay rights. Are you listening? You or your son or your nephew or your daughter or your next door neighbor or your girlfriend are about to go into a state of pain if this goes through. Stay tuned and be ready to help. Collins of Maine and others can put a stop to this. And we are going to need to get involved, because our daughter, our niece, our sister, maybe even our mother may need to have the right to do what they want with their body.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the noontime news and politics show heading into the weekend here. I'd like to welcome in Lieutenant Governor candidate Aaron Ruggenberg. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
I appreciate your coming in because it's been a busy week nationally, keeping an eye on the Supreme Court, not just their decisions, but the composition. As we know, with the retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, there is a lot of concern about a woman's right to choose. Talk with us about, you were probably the first to really get that out there, saying that the General Assembly needs to go back in and address this issue. What have you been hearing from folks?
So across the state, I mean, since Trump's first election 2 years ago, women and activists around Rhode Island have been stepping up, demanding, begging our state leadership to take this crisis seriously. We knew that Roe v. Wade was at acute risk. The establishment continued to say there's nothing to worry about, this isn't at risk, this is just a gesture. But we knew that wasn't true, and we saw that come into crystal clear focus this week with the announced retirement of Supreme Court Justice Kennedy. We know that Republicans in Washington are already mobilizing to attack our rights with another conservative radical justice on the Supreme Court. And the first thing that is going to come into their line of fire is overturning Roe v. Wade. And we also know, I don't think all Rhode Islanders know this, the moment that Roe v. Wade is overturned nationally, a woman's right to choose immediately becomes illegal in the state of Rhode Island because of long, still on the books laws from previous decades. Rhode Island's one of 20 states where that's the case. We have an F from NARAL pro-choice in their state-by-state listings. So we have needed acute emergency action, and this year the legislature again failed women in Rhode Island. We failed to pass the Reproductive Health Care Act, which would codify the protections of Roe v. Wade at the state level. And that's why I put out a call at the moment that Supreme Court Justice Kennedy announces retirement to the Speaker of the House, to the Senate President, to other statewide leaders. Let's reconvene the General Assembly immediately. We need to have an emergency session because we're in an emergency to pass the Reproductive Health Care Act.
Let's talk a little bit about the position, as you just spoke to, of where Rhode Island is nationally. You talk about being one of those 20 states, because there is that question. Can the state really supersede national Supreme Court law if it's on the books? Tell us how that works. I mean, are there other states that there are those protections in place?
So Roe v. Wade created a federal law of the land that abortion, that a woman's right to choose was legal within the parameters of the case law. When Roe v. Wade is overturned, what it means is that that decision goes to the states. So it is within our power here in Rhode Island to protect that right to choose for Rhode Island women. The fact is, Rhode Island leaders have not stepped up to take that action yet, despite all of the organizing, all of the protestation, all of the begging that's been going on. And by the way, I think it's worth pointing out, this is not an issue in a vacuum where there's been a failure in the General Assembly. This year, of all years, with women's rights under assault again and again by the Trump administration, the legislature's record has been abysmal. On a women's right to equal pay for equal work, there has been no action. On sexual harassment and rising up to meet the challenges and realities of the Me Too movement, there has been no action. On getting guns out of our schools, which is a movement that has been largely led by women activists and leaders in our state, no action. And of course, passing the Reproductive Health Care Act, no action. So that is unacceptable. And we're seeing across our state community members coming together to say that's unacceptable and to demand better from state leaders, to demand that we immediately reconvene, have an emergency session, and take up the Reproductive Health Care Act.
How forcefully will you continue to push on this issue? We did just see the Assembly adjourn last week. We're heading into the 4th of July holiday. Obviously lobbying personally the House Speaker and the Senate President, clearly a grassroots movement as well. You know, how vociferous is the community going to be in trying to push for the session to come back in? And if we hear from the leaders that for whatever reason they say no, I mean, how hard are you going to push on this issue?
Well, we know we're going to have to push hard. State leaders have already made their choice very clear that they are going to dismiss the calls by women in our state for action on this issue and all of the others that we talked about. So we know that this isn't going to be an easy battle, but the important ones never are. And that's why I think what it's going to take is real sustained organizing and pressure by folks across our state. There was the first action last night. A huge number of people came to the State House to echo that call for an emergency session. That needs to be just the beginning, not the end. And I think that there's a whole lot of Rhode Islanders who are fired up to make sure that that is just the beginning. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the weeks to come.
Would you say this is pretty high on your list of priorities right now with the assembly business not quite gone away as you're looking for it to go back in, but is this tops on your list?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an issue, it's personal for me. I was very close with my grandmother, who was executive director of her local Planned Parenthood in the years before Roe v. Wade. And so I grew up hearing about the challenges that women went through before we had a national law of the land, before these rights were enshrined. And I think it's really important to point out that overturning Roe v. Wade doesn't end abortions. Abortions have been around since the dawn of time. What this is about is making sure that abortions are safe, healthy, and legal. Because whatever happens legally, this is going to continue to happen. It's about making sure that women have safety, have protections, have health, and that government isn't coming in between a family and the most personal choice that they can make. So I think this is, of course, a top priority of mine. I think it should be a top priority of every state leader in Rhode Island. We are one of the only states in our region that has not codified these rights. Rhode Island is, we're on this list with Texas and Alabama and states like that. It's unacceptable, and it is time for state leaders to admit we failed women, and we need to step up and take real action.
Now, this is just one of the ways a new composition of the Supreme Court can manifest itself. Of course, there's discussions as well, potentially for Ruth Bader Ginsburg to be the next to potentially retire. Under a Trump administration, if he ends up getting his appointments of relatively, if they're on the youngish side, this could be a major shift in the country.
I think a lot of us were hit with this news and felt some real despair, because this is a movement that has the potential to reshape our country for decades and decades to come. For me, when I'm feeling despair, what helps is to focus on what we have control over and to take some concrete action to defend our rights and communities. We know that we have some control on this issue and others at the state level, and that's why we need to step up. We could get into a longer conversation, by the way, about what I would argue, and I think a lot of people are arguing, that having a president that is under criminal investigation currently should not be making a lifetime appointment to a Supreme Court that ultimately there's a very good chance that criminal investigation could go before. So I think there's some very strong questions there that I hope that every Democrat and every patriotic American in Congress is going to be strongly considering and speaking out on, if they're because that's a very real concern.
Well, I appreciate your coming in today to express again your concerns for the state's lack of addressing the Reproductive Health Care Act. You said you had the event at the State House last night. Do you envision more events moving forward of just that show of solidarity and support?
Absolutely, and again, I would want to make clear that this isn't me. This is a broad movement. There was an organization called the Women's Project that organized last night.
Yep.
There are advocates, legislators, folks around our state that are involved in this, and I absolutely envision there's going to be a lot more action. We're talking with a number of organizations about continuing with a continued action and organizing next week, and that's just going to continue. So this is emergency mode. Time's been up for a while, but now that we know the Supreme Court is getting reshaped, time is truly up. We need state action. We can't delay anymore, and that's why I would call again Speaker Mattiello, Senate President Ruggiero. We need action. Bring the session back. Have an emergency legislative session to pass the Reproductive Health Care Act. It is time for our state to step up.
Okay, we're going to keep an eye on the Assembly as it adjourned, but again, Aaron and other community leaders looking to get it back in to address the Reproductive Health Care Act. Aaron, I appreciate your taking the time to come in. I know
Thanks,
it's
Kate.
a busy day. We're going to let Aaron go. We'll be back, speaking of actions, with our next guest. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the Friday noontime show as we get your weekend started a little bit sooner here. But Frank Sims with UNEP's Local 5098 has some work to do before the end of the day. There is an informational picket outside of Rhode Island Hospital pertaining to the negotiations between UNEP and Lifespan and 2,400 members. Thanks for taking the time to come in today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. So you're going to be out there to bringing attention to contract negotiations. Contract's up June 30th.
June 30th.
So talk with us about the fight.
Let's see. Well, what we're actually doing today is we're taking this action to bring out to the public that Lifespan continues to disrespect and devalue the employees in Rhode Island Hospital as well as Hasbro.
And it has to do with the healthcare costs in the contract, has to do with retirement, but there's probably broader as well. I mean, what are you really looking for in this contract?
Healthcare costs are one of our concerns, absolutely. Our retirement benefits. We also are looking for patient safety. That's always a big concern for us. The amount of care that we can give to patients due to short staffing is a concern as well. To have our wage scales brought up to a competitive level where we can be at market. As you know, right now we are the only level 1 in the state, and we have what I consider to be a revolving door policy with the new nurses that come in. They come in and stay a couple of years, use it as a stepping stone and go elsewhere. What we would like to do is hope to change that so that Lifespan and Rhode Island Hospital reflect what we would like it to be, which is not a place you start your career to go somewhere else, rather to be a place where you'd like to end up.
So that was one of the, I didn't see, that you bring up an interesting point there, that revolving door. So what is it that, because there's just better opportunities elsewhere, it's you can't retain them? How can you retain them?
Well, one of the things with the younger nurses is obviously the market value on the scales. I believe ours haven't gone up since 2010. They can come in here, get a couple of years of experience, and then go somewhere for a considerably higher wage. And for younger nurses, that's very attractive.
So you're head of the 5098 here. You're relatively new to the post.
Correct.
But so you've kind of got that perspective. Tell us your journey to heading up the local 5098 here, kind of what you've seen here in Rhode Island.
Originally, I started at Rhode Island probably a little over 7 years ago. I've been through a couple of contract negotiations. Tends to see the same thing going over and over again. In my attempt to change that, to be able to bring something different to the table and hopefully to get a better outcome for us.
And it's the informational picket. Again, this is to raise awareness. You talk about the contract negotiations. I mean, what do you want the general public to know? Maybe someone who doesn't have a dog in the race, so to speak, but is in the healthcare system, might go to Rhode Island Hospital. What do you want the public to know about why UNEP is taking this action today?
Well, we're taking the action, as I said, for patient safety, lack of availability of resources. We want to be able to have the materials necessary to do our daily jobs. We'd like to be appreciated by the hospital for those of us who are at the bedside doing the actual care. As far as what would bring them to Rhode Island Hospital, obviously, like I said, it's the only level 1 trauma center. Anything that's hospital capable would be available at that hospital. The reason that we're having difficulty keeping people I've already stated, but it just doesn't make sense that someone would go somewhere else when this seems like the place that you would want to migrate to.
And so you've been in the industry for a number of years. It's 2018. When you first got into it, how much has it changed since you first got into nursing?
There seems to be a trend with the short staffing going in that direction, at least where we work at Rhode Island Hospital, where we have less time to be attentive to our patients, less time to tend to their needs. and do what we actually got into this profession to do, which is care for people who need it.
It's like any number of industries feel that there's just not enough time. But speaking of time, you're going to be out there from what, 2 to 5 this afternoon?
2 to 5, correct.
And do you know how many folks you expect to be turning out?
I expect all of them to come out.
Hitting the sidewalks for the informational picket. So do you expect that there will be a contract executed by the 30th, or is there potential to see this protracted into the next month?
Obviously, the options right now are still open. We have to meet again for negotiations. To get into the details of it's a little inappropriate for me at this point with the hospital. So we would always hope to come to an agreement with the hospital as far as what they think versus what we think. We don't necessarily know which direction that's going to go or how soon that's going to remedy.
But you think there's potential for some middle ground and potential for a contract that you feel good about?
Sure, as long as it's fair and equitable to the membership, I think that's what we're wanting.
Okay, well, if you see them out there by Rhode Island Hospital today, I wanted to give you a little more information as to why UNAP Local 5098, representing over 2,400 workers, is out there with this informational picket today, with the contract ending on June 30th. Well, I'll let you get on your way, Frank. I appreciate you taking the time to come in.
I appreciate
Go around the corner, and I'm going to wrap up here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
All right, thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us today at our special Friday noon time slot in the summertime. It's a warm one out there. Hope you're staying cool wherever you are. If you're at the beach, I'm very jealous. It was a good show today, kicking off with Ray Rickman, the former state representative, former Deputy Secretary of State, giving his big view. Aaron Ruggenberg, former state rep, looking to get the General Assembly, though, back into session, running for lieutenant governor as a Democrat, but concerned that the state did not take up the Reproductive Health Care Act. Now looking at what's taking place at the Supreme Court level with the retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, making that push along with others here in the state. And Frank Sims with UNAP's Local 5098. They'll be out there this afternoon outside of Rhode Island Hospital. This is the United Nurses and Allied Professionals. They're in contract negotiations with Lifespan, bringing attention to what he said are some issues facing the nurses, talking about retention rate, talking about healthcare, talking about retirement, and more as well. Wanted to get his vantage point here in the studio. Well, we look forward to a very, hopefully, restful holiday week next week. Be sure to tune in to Go Local. We'll be here in studio off and on throughout the week, but we'll be returning in earnest following the 4th of July. But of course, read golocalprov.com, read us on Facebook. We appreciate your feedback. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel.